Okay, I'm making a video on a EME electric starter onto a DLE 35. Uh, Installed this a day or so ago. I'm searching the web for instructions. There's a few out there, and if you look 3 or 4, you'll pick up the tips that you need to do to put this on. And this may be a little bit of a help of a few things that I found. I'm not going to obviously remove it and reinstall it, but tell you a couple things that may help you if you're trying to put one of these on. Basically, what you're going to need to do to install this is to remove, this is the existing prop hub that comes on the DLE 35, and you're going to replace it with 3 parts here. This hub, this gear, and this spacer down here. And then you're also going to put on the assembly that is the motor. With regards to the motor, I thought the first thing, just to get it out of the way, that I would remove the magnetic pickup for the ignition. Don't do that, it's not necessary. As you can see, it fits right over it. And once you get it installed, trying to put the screws, you can't get to the screws to put it back on. So don't bother removing that. You won't bother it. The other thing under installing, I was working on the hub first, but install the motor, but before you clamp it on here, figure out how you're going to wire it, because it has 2 lugs. Of course, your positive and negative lug. The best would be, but I didn't have it, would be to get the right bayonet or clips that go onto this little flat lug that's right here. I soldered. Well, it's hard to do here on the plane, so fix your wiring before you install it onto the plane, onto the motor, particularly if you're going to solder. So I just ran a real long lead, put it back to the plane, and then I worked on the wiring in there after I got it on. So wire the motor if you're going to solder. Don't worry about taking off the ignition. And when you go to install it, you're just going to remove, on the side that you're placing the starter motor, the bolts that were holding your engine. And then they supply this extension and a longer bolt. They actually supply even longer ones that would be used in some other installation. So you got 2 of those. So you just clamp it on, get this one in first, the bottom one adjust, and this one, and you can get everything lined up. And you'll see in the instructions, and everybody will tell you over and over, you really have to be careful. And before you turn this thing on at all, grease these gears well. There's been reports of teeth breaking and problems. They have to be greased. So obviously I greased them first and it's working fine, but I just wouldn't try it without it. I just used high temperature Valvoline red grease. They recommend another product, but I think it's the exact same thing. So I got enough grease there for the rest of my life. Now, the reason I'm bringing this is the removal of this hub. What you need to do, I'm going to show you over here. This is how the hub is on your plane. Here's your prop bolt. It's hard to do this and hold. These are, I believe, 4mm bolts that come on the DLE. This would be your prop hub or washer, thrust washer, and then your prop would go on there. You're going to remove this piece off the shaft of the engine, and this is a 10mm hex. But in order to turn this, you need to hold the hub. And in order not to tear it up by trying to vice grip it or to hold the engine, you can make a little tool. Mine is very rough, but here's the secret. You want something to hold this while you're turning this. So you can take a tool, in this case I used aluminum off an old landing gear, but you can fit this on here, bolt it onto there, hold it with this hand while you're backing this off. So that's what you need to do. And then you need a 10mm long socket to remove it. So that's the removal. You get this off, apply a little heat. Have a heat gun. You're lightly with a torch. I wouldn't use that around the engine myself, but heat gun, hair dryer, warm this up real well, and you can tap it off the key. The key on mine stayed in the shaft. Was no problem with the drive shaft key. And so these are removed. Now when you want to put these parts back on, as I said, it's going to be three. You're going to have a washer back here that's keyed, the gear that's keyed, and then this part, the hub, that's keyed. So this back one, it's hard to see there, but when you get it and look at it, if you can imagine, it will look about like your thrust washer or the front washer on your plane, but there'll be on the back side about a 1/2 millimeter step here, and on the other side about a 1/4 millimeter of a step here. And with no instructions, it's hard to tell which way it goes on. The larger side sticking out about a 1/2 millimeter goes toward the engine. I found this out because I put it backwards, and it tightens up too much against the case of the engine and your prop won't turn. So you need the thicker side to give you that little space right there so that that can turn. You can see the magnet coming up. That's what holds, that's the washer that has your timing magnet in it, and you want to get that on first. The other thing about this, the one that you're going to replace it with, these are 4 millimeter bolts. The ones on here, and it comes with it, are 5 millimeter bolts, which everything bolts together, except that means that your prop is drilled for 4 millimeters, and you're going to need to drill it out to 5 millimeters. And when you go to install it, instead of a 10 millimeter hub on the shaft, it's an 11 millimeter. So you need a 10 millimeter to get it off, an 11 millimeter to put it back on. And it would probably be a good idea to use some thread lock when you're putting that back on. So those are the basic things of it. Once you get to that, it's pretty simple, but having a tool to hold this while you back off the nut, knowing that it's a 10 millimeter to come off, an 11 millimeter to go back on, and that you need to drill your prop for 5 millimeter screws instead of the 4 millimeter that's standard on DLE, and rewire, have your motor wired before you start, and that should be it. So far I've been happy. We haven't flown it, obviously I haven't got the cowl back on, but you'll just see it turn. But I wired it, or put it on my toggle switch on my transmitter. So if I stand back here, and you can see I can just, I thought that would be good with the spring switch. So hopefully it's going to be a nice way to start my plane. I hope this helps you if you're doing an electric starter. I appreciate it. You guys take care. Safe flying.